I'm Miss Maisie, and today we'll be talking with our business librarian, Miss Lindsay.
Hi.
So I guess my first question is sort of, do teens actually need a cover letter and resume?
So not every job that you apply for, especially when you're first starting out, is going to require you to submit a resume and a cover letter. Sometimes you'll just have to fill out an application. However, having a resume on hand is going to make filling out that application easier because you're going to have all the information that you need right there. And in a lot of cases, when you're applying online, you can just copy and paste from your resume into the application. The other thing that is great about a resume is that once you have one put together, you'll also be able to use it for things other than jobs. So if you're applying for scholarships, sometimes they'll ask for a resume. If you're applying for honor societies or things like that, they might require one as well. So anything that you can do in advance and then just tweak or update it when you need it is going to be to your benefit. So there's not really any downside to putting one together now.
Awesome, yeah. You know, something I have always thought was a little silly is having to have a cover letter. So I guess, could you talk a little bit about the purpose of a cover letter and how that's different from a resume?
Sure. So your resume is basically a document that's going to summarize your work experience, your education, and the skills that you have. A cover letter is actually, it's kind of the bridge between the resume and the job description because it's going to describe those skills with respect to the job. So kind of explaining to the employer what skills you have that are most relevant and how they relate to the job that you're applying for. So, you know, the resume is going to have everything, and most of the time you can use the same resume to apply for multiple jobs. But when you write a cover letter, it's tailored to the specific job and to the specific company or organization that you're applying for. So it's kind of explaining to the employer, here's why you should hire me, and then referring back to your resume to kind of support that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So then, yeah, with that, you mentioned kind of resumes have like everything, cover letters have more specific things. What sort of information should be going into your cover letter / resume?
Sure. So your resume, usually there's a pretty standard format, and it's pretty easy if you Google it. You can find templates online, but it's going to include your education. So if you, are in high school, list where you go to school, maybe your GPA if it's really good, and then any work experience you have. If you don't have a ton of work experience, we'll talk about there's other things you could put in your resume. So you might list classes that you've taken or things that are relevant to the job. So that's going to go in your resume, and usually it's chronological order, so like the most recent stuff first and then going backward. Your cover letter is going to identify the job that you're applying for. So specifically, dear this person, I am applying for this job title. Explain why you're interested in the job, and then also what skills and experience from your resume make you a good fit based on the job requirements.
Okay, yeah. I remember trying to get my first job in high school, and I had never worked a job before. So what sort of things would people put on their resume if they've never worked a job before?
First of all, this is super common, and everybody has to have a first job. So employers understand that. If you haven't had a paying job before, there is other things that you can put in your resume that'll still explain your attributes. You want to show them that you are responsible, that you're organized, skills like that. So if you haven't worked in a job, you might have extracurricular activities, especially if you hold some kind of, you're president of a club or you're the captain of your team or something like that. Sports, things like that. Depending on the kind of job you're applying for, if there are classes that you've taken either in school or outside of school, if you're applying for a job that requires computer skills and you've taken, advanced classes in those areas, definitely that's stuff that you can include on your resume. And then if you've done volunteer work, that is another great area where you can showcase both the things that you've done and also the skills that you've learned. And that might be things like time management or organization, customer service or skills like that. And all of those things are really what employees are looking for in your job history. So if you don't have a formal job history, anything you can do to demonstrate that you have those types of skills is going to be really helpful.
Absolutely. And I have to plug it because I always do, that if you are looking for volunteer hours to build up that resume, you can always come join us at the library. We're always looking for teen volunteers.
That was my first job out of high school, and also I got in there because I was a volunteer at my local library.
That was my first job out of high school, and I got it there for the same reason. I think, we've talked a little bit about how resumes have a very set structure, but cover letters, I think, are a little different. They're always the part of the job search process I struggle with the most. So I guess, how do you structure a cover letter?
So a cover letter is going to be structured like a business letter, which is also a thing that doesn't necessarily intuitive, but there are templates online. So Google business letter, cover letter. Basically, the important things that you're going to want to hit are the date, contact information, dear so-and-so. You can put dear hiring manager unless there is a name listed in the job opening. So I think back a long time ago, people would write like dear sir or madam, things like that. Dear hiring manager takes care of all that stuff and makes you sound professional. Usually a cover letter is maybe 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is going to introduce you. Like I said, you're going to identify what job you're applying for and then why you're applying. And then the next paragraph or 2, depending on how much experience you have, is where you're going to go into more of the description of your skills and experience and why they make you a good fit for the job. And one thing that I think people always struggle with, so adults who've been working multiple jobs and new employees alike, is making sure that you explain from the perspective of the employer. So rather than, these are what I want this job because I will get all of these things out of it, it's what can I bring to the company or what can I bring to the organization. So not, I think this will be a really good learning opportunity for me. It's, I can help you with this project, or I am a really hard worker who can contribute to your success, or stuff like that.
I always think of it as kind of like, this is my chance to brag about myself.
Absolutely. And also, your cover letter is what they're going to read first. So, especially in in an economy like we have right now, where there are a lot of people looking for jobs, perhaps, or a lot of people applying for particular jobs, anything that you can do to distinguish yourself in that first letter and make them want to look at your cover letter, or make them want to look at your resume and make them want to interview you. Anything you can put in that letter that's going to make you stand out is going to be to your benefit.
Like I said before, I've often really struggled with cover letters. I know I'm not the only one. So, and honestly, even the first time I wrote a resume, it was really difficult. So what are some of the resources that you recommend to help people structure those cover letters and those resumes and figure out what to put on them?
I feel like for both resumes and cover letters, having lots of examples is really important. Sometimes if you're, if it's a college career center or a high school guidance counselor or something like that, they might have example resumes that people with similar work experience or backgrounds than you maybe have used in the past, and that can be a great resource. The library has a resource called Brain Fuse Job Now, which I think you talked about in the last video in this series. Also great for resumes and cover letters because it includes not only those templates and information about what goes into resumes and cover letters, but they also have live coaching, so you can talk to a tutor in real time. And they have a service where you can submit your resume or cover letter, and then somebody will review it and give you feedback. I can't stress enough having people look at your resume and cover letter before you submit it to whatever job you're applying for. So important, because even if you feel like you've got everything perfect, making sure that you've got all the little details correct, that if you're sending out a lot of resumes, making sure you don't put the wrong company name or the wrong job title or something on there before you send it out is so important. So have somebody proofread it, have somebody look at it.
Absolutely. I will total full confession. When I was applying for my first job out of college, I definitely misspelled my name in my cover letter at one point, and I remember someone caught it before I submitted it, and I was just so grateful.
I applied for an editing job and forgot to change the company name in the cover letter.
Oh, no.
Shockingly enough, I didn't get a call, but they were looking for someone detail oriented, and pretty sure I shot myself in the foot with that one.
Yeah.
And I will never forget it.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I get it. I feel like for every job you get, there's always the one that got away.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Well, so do you have any sort of final tips of like the things that have helped you or that you recommend that people do or think about?
Yeah. One tip that I really emphasize, I know a lot of times if you're applying for a lot of different jobs, it's really easy to just try and send the same stuff to everybody. It's quicker, it's easier. But it's really important to make sure you customize, especially your cover letter, to make it as specific to the job you're applying for as possible. To find that information, you make sure you read the job description and the job posting really carefully and make note of the requirements that they list and even the words that they use. Because there are, especially larger companies will use software to screen resumes and cover letters, and the more keywords that you have in your materials that match the keywords that they have in mind, the better or the higher your resume is going to turn up in that pile. So a lot of times when I apply for a job, I will go through the ad and kind of break out a list of everything that's in there and then make another column in my document and go through and match each of those points with something from my resume. Because that way, when I write my letter, I can go through and say, basically, you asked for this, I have that, and this is why. And then make sure you hit all of those things. So
that is such a smart way to handle that.
It definitely makes it a little easier because I used to try to just write a letter and make sure I crammed in all those things, and it's a lot easier when you really just go point by point. And I know people who will do a resume and a cover letter that is literally just like a bullet list. You asked for these things, I have these things. I usually still format it as a letter, but I like to make sure that I'm addressing at least the most important things that they ask for.
Absolutely.
Other tips, definitely proofreading. If you're applying for a lot of different jobs, take my advice, make sure you triple check that you've got the right company and the right person's name on it. And last but not least, make sure that the email address that you're providing is a professional one, preferably something like your first name, last name @Gmail. If you have an email address that's silly or funny or an inside joke for your friends, probably not the thing that you want at the top of your resume or that you're having people contact you at. Same thing with your outgoing voicemail message. So if you've submitted a bunch of resumes and you're hopefully going to be getting some calls about interviews, make sure that if they don't get you, that the voicemail they get is something that's professional, that they know it's you, and that they don't have second thoughts about contacting you based on what they hear.
Absolutely.
I also want to put in a plug for a resource that I forgot. The Jobs and Career page on the library website has a link to something called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And this is also just a free website you can find online. So it's information from the U.S. government, and it has a lot of information about different jobs and careers. So especially when you are looking to put together an application, you can look through that listing. It'll say, kind of what the skills or requirements that jobs in that category have. And then you can make sure that you include those keywords in your resume, in your cover letter. And last but not least, Indeed.com, where there are a lot of job listings, is also a great resource for this kind of information. And I have actually a couple of articles specifically for putting together a resume or a cover letter for teens who haven't had a lot of job experience, which is what I used to prepare this video. So definitely recommend that one as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me, and I feel like I definitely learned some things I did wrong with my first cover letters and resumes, and I definitely feel like we all have a few more skills for going out and getting that summer job.
Excellent. Well, good luck.
Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you join us for another program soon. Bye!